Layla Kensington, a formidable business mogul, had achieved what most could only dream of. She had built an empire, one that granted her power, influence, and an unshakable presence in the world of luxury aviation. Today was a significant day. Her maiden flight aboard her latest acquisition, a cutting-edge private jet, was about to take off. To mark the occasion, she had booked herself a first-class seat, a symbolic gesture to enjoy the very experience her high-profile clientele would soon come to expect. The airport was a familiar landscape to Layla. The efficiency, the polished service, the way staff recognized her name, it all played into the life she had meticulously crafted. With her ticket scanned and security clearance granted without a hitch, she made her way through the VIP lounge, where a warm greeting awaited her. She could already envision the smooth flight ahead, allowing her a brief moment of relaxation before the intense negotiations scheduled upon arrival in New York. As she stepped aboard the jet, an odd sense of peace settled over her. The plush seats, the hushed elegance of first class, the distant hum of the engines, it was exactly what she had envisioned. She eased into her seat, sighing in contentment, preparing for the journey ahead. But just as she began scrolling through her tablet, reviewing notes for an upcoming meeting, an unexpected interruption shattered the tranquility. A flight attendant approached, her expression tight, her smile strained. "Excuse me, ma'am," the attendant spoke, her voice laced with something unspoken. "May I see your ticket?" Layla, slightly taken aback, handed over the neatly folded pass without hesitation. "Of course. But I've already been checked in," she said, her tone professional but tinged with curiosity. The attendant barely glanced at the ticket before shifting her attention back to Layla, her gaze scrutinizing. Then, in a voice that carried a weight beyond mere protocol, she muttered, "This is a first-class seat, but you don't look like someone who would have purchased a ticket like this." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Layla's grip tightened on the armrest, though her expression remained composed. "I can assure you I did. Just as I have for countless other flights." The tension in the cabin was palpable. Nearby passengers exchanged uneasy glances. A businessman a few seats away frowned. "She's given you her ticket," he interjected. "What's the problem?" The flight attendant ignored him, arms now folded. "How do I know you're really who you claim to be?" Layla inhaled slowly, maintaining her calm despite the rising frustration. This was beyond unreasonable. Yet, before she could formulate a response, the attendant turned on her heel and disappeared down the aisle. Layla exhaled sharply, believing, for a brief, hopeful moment, that the bizarre situation had ended. But it hadn't. Minutes later, the attendant returned, this time with an airport security officer trailing behind her, along with a man who had only just boarded the plane. He stood beside Layla's seat, his posture oozing entitlement. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint. There's reason to believe you're occupying a seat that isn't yours. I need you to vacate immediately." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Passengers turned in their seats, eyes wide with disbelief. Layla straightened, her patience now dangerously thin. She met the officer's gaze head-on. "This is my ticket. Purchased it. It's valid. You're free to verify it again." "We don't need to verify anything," the flight attendant snapped. "You need to leave. Now." For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Layla's mind raced. This wasn't just a mistake. It was an insult, an injustice, and it was unfolding in front of an entire plane full of people. Taking a measured breath, she stood, her voice steady yet laced with undeniable authority. "Let me make something very clear. This jet, this aircraft you're standing in, belongs to me. I acquired it, and I booked this ticket, my ticket to be part of its inaugural flight." A stunned silence fell over the cabin. The security officer hesitated, glancing toward the flight attendant, who looked momentarily uncertain. But instead of backing down, they doubled down. Without another word, they forcibly escorted Layla off the plane. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, humiliated but unbroken, She overheard the man now occupying her seat chuckle smugly. "See? Told you it'd work," he whispered to the flight attendant, his girlfriend. "I only paid for an economy ticket, and now I'm in first class. New York is gonna be amazing." That was it. The final spark to ignite the inferno burning within her. Layla stopped in her tracks, her pulse roaring in her ears. Turning slowly, she cast one last piercing look toward the plane. "You're making a mistake," she said, voice calm but laced with an unmistakable warning. "And I promise, you will regret this." With a sharp inhale, she pulled out her phone. Fingers flying across the screen, she made a call. Back on the plane, the intercom crackled to life. "Attention passengers of Flight 1125, the captain's voice announced. "Due to unforeseen technical issues, our departure will be delayed. Please remain seated as we resolve the matter." Layla, now standing in the terminal, pressed the phone to her ear. "I want that security officer terminated," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Within minutes, the consequences unraveled. The security officer was summoned, questioned, and dismissed on the spot. And inside the plane, the flight attendant, still reveling in her perceived victory, was about to face her own reckoning. A uniformed officer appeared at her side. "Victoria Carter?" he asked, voice firm. The flight attendant's smug expression faltered. "You've been relieved of duty, effective immediately," the officer continued. "You are accused of forcibly removing a first-class passenger under false pretenses. The same passenger who owns this aircraft." Victoria's face drained of color. I was just helping my boyfriend," she stammered, desperation creeping into her tone. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." "Gather your things," the officer instructed. "You're to leave the premises immediately." As she was led away, her boyfriend sat frozen in first class, the weight of reality sinking in. I'm sorry," he whispered, eyes wide with regret. "I never thought it would come to this." Victoria's expression hardened. "You're sorry," she hissed. "I just lost everything for you." "And for what?" "A single flight in first class." Meanwhile, outside the jet, Layla watched the scene unfold. There was no gloating, no triumphant smirk. Just a quiet, resolute satisfaction. Justice, though often slow, had been served. With one last glance at the disgraced pair, she turned away. She had more important things to focus on. There was a plane to board, and this time it would be on her terms. Minutes later, she stepped back onto the jet. Her seat remained untouched, pristine, waiting for her. The flight crew, now under strict new directives, stood at attention, no longer making eye contact, their deference evident.